Hey,
Hey,
Tracy's doing it.
everybody. Hey, Tracy, you made it early. Good for you. That's great.
I did. I did. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. So welcome everybody. We're really excited to welcome you to a Taylor Tuesday. Dr. Kraus is on the road, and so I'm the fill-in or the lone moderator this evening. But welcome. So we're lucky to have a couple of good friends here. Pete Turnbull from Sersha. I say that right, Pete? Isn't
You
that how it's
nailed it.
pronounced?
You nailed it. You're like
Sersha.
one of the only people who can actually get it right. Well played.
I think that's because you probably taught me. And then Dr. Tracy Lovick, our good friend and dermatology expert. And so we're excited to get rolling here. So we're going to start off. I will going to do a little intro here, guys, about Taylor. And then Dr. Lovick, Pete's going to do a few comments about Sersha, and then we'll let you get into your clinical presentation. So I want to remind everybody that we're, first of all, we're thrilled that you're here. This webinar, of course, will be on the Taylor Medical site, Toot Suite from Siobhan and Carla and Ashley and the team at Taylor. And thank you to them for coordinating this whole thing as usual, too. But you'll be able to watch any of the old webinars. We're seeing a lot of people go back and check things out, especially the coding ones, which has been great. But you can go to the Taylor Medical website, click on the webinar button, and you can watch this again. So, and you're definitely going to want to do that after you hear the great presentations from Mr. Turnbull and Dr. Lovick. So just a reminder for everybody, for those of you especially who are new and those of you who have been on a lot, we thank you for being on here for the last almost 2 years now. But for those of you who have not, please get your information sent over to Taylor. You can come up with the data. You can present it any way you can. If you can do an Excel sheet, even better. But I know not every doc is tech savvy, so whatever you can do to get the information over to Carl and the team, and the products you're using, the vendors you use, the pricing you have, the size of the products that you want, you can put them all in a Word document, a spreadsheet, however you want to do. The team can even help you put that together. But anything you can do that way can save you up to 40%, sometimes even more on some of these products. You get great discounts on the products of all the people who come on here and speak, which is just super for your practice. And we definitely want you to please get involved. We're seeing tremendous savings. The company has been growing leaps and bounds because of what you are all doing, and it's very much appreciated. So please participate. That's the way that this company gets stronger and continues to grow and gets even better discounts, is when everyone participates, not just becomes a member, but actually uses the platform that exists. So please do that. And so we're excited. So we're going to first start out with Mr. Pete Turnbull from Sersha. And Pete, I'm going to jump aside, and then Tracy, I'll come back and get you rolling here in 3 or 4 slides. But otherwise, I'm going to just disappear and let you guys do your thing.
Thanks so much, Dr. King, and really thank you to everybody at Taylor for having us on. You guys have been great partners and really supportive, especially through the pandemic, and love what you continue to do with Taylor Tuesdays. So thank you to the entire team, especially you, Siobhan. I know you're there, so thank you for all the hard work as well. Okay, before we had originally planned that Tracy, you were going to be about 15 minutes late, so I was going to talk about Swift, and then you were going to come on and talk about Warts. But now you're here, so you get to hear me talk about Swift for a minute or two. First of all, glad you could join us. Glad you could join us early or on time, whichever it is. Are you joining us from a taxi? Uber? Where are you joining us from?
I am, yes.
I love it. That is modern day webinar presentation. Well played. Okay, so I'll just open up just a little bit about the technology, and I know we've done one of these webinars, more focused on the technology itself previously. We wanted to sort of shift the focus of this dialogue really to more clinically oriented conversation around warts. And ultimately, the question we sort of get asked often is really, what is Swift and why should I care? Like, what is this box? What's it doing? And for us, and for any technology that I've represented in my career, it's about what problems do you solve? And really with Swift, we're solving 2 primary problems. We're solving a clinical problem with warts, which are historically very, very frustrating condition to treat. So that's number 1, and everything starts and stops with that. So that's what Dr. Lahovic is going to be here to talk about today, is why warts are such a problem, and why we're seeing, really promising results with Swift as a solution to that problem. And then the next problem we solve as a result of that ends up being a practice management challenge for a lot of people, which is focused around differentiation and high value patient flow. So as someone who owns and operates a practice, how do you stand out from other dermatologists in the area, podiatrists in your area, and how do you actually generate higher value patient flow coming through the door? And that's what Swift allows you to do, because it falls outside of traditional reimbursement codes. So just a piece quickly on that. This is about differentiation, right? So it's about standing out. It's about putting a pin in a map in a place like Austin, where Dr. Tomajan is one of the only providers, right? It's about, Tracy, you're one of the only providers in the entire state of PA to be able to offer this treatment. We still only have about 300 clinics now. We launched in 2019. There's only about 300 clinics now with Swift in the US. There's still a massive opportunity to stand out from the other providers, and that's across dermatology and podiatry. So in podiatry, there's still a significant opportunity to stand out. And then the next piece is about driving, higher patient conversion and higher value patient conversion. This is where your digital presence come in, and this is a big part of what we do with Swift. There's the product itself, but then there's the support that we offer in terms of marketing and getting your practice up and running. So there's a big piece to that, which I won't go into today, but if you're interested in speaking about it, we're always more than happy to chat to you about how we do drive patient flow. And then the financial piece, again, this is for a conversation for another time if you're interested in it. But the numbers are really, really promising when you boil it down on an ROI perspective. So that's the piece for me, just about the actual technology itself and our program. We'll circle back to the end if you do want to reach out and have some questions or would like to discuss further. We can set up a time to connect with you specifically. But let's not belabor the point too much. Dr. King, if you would like to come back on, you can. If not, I can intro Tracy, whatever you prefer.
Why don't you go ahead? Why don't you go ahead, Pete? Tracy doesn't even need an intro. She's such a famous derm queen now. Don't take that as a good term, Tracy, not a bad thing. But I'll let you, Pete, do the thing, and Tracy, I'll let you do your thing, and I'll just keep to the side.
Awesome. But no, Tracy, thank you so much for being on tonight, and you're such a great advocate. Quick story, when we launched this business, we reached out. The technology actually comes from Scotland, which is where the name Saoirse comes from. And one of our key researchers and sort of the brilliant minds behind the technology, we went to them and said, okay, first person in the US, who do we have to reach out to? And there was only one name, and it was Dr. Tracy Lehovic. And so we were really fortunate to connect with Tracy early in our sort of journey. And Tracy's a clinical professor at Temple School of Podiatric Medicine. She runs their program down there and really has a firm grasp on all things dermatologically involved, so to speak. So when we got together, we were just so thrilled to be able to get the technology into Temple so that Tracy could start to experience it. Because for us, that was our big question, is how is this therapy going to fit in with someone who has all of the tools available to her and has tried almost every technique available to her in the treatment of some of the worst warts in the world. And so that's kind of where our relationship started. She's a wonderful individual, and she's loads of fun. Tracy, really appreciate you being here. She's also the wart queen. So dermatology queen. I think we can call you the official wart queen. It's no longer unofficial.
It's a dubious honor. It's a dubious honor, but I'll take it.
Awesome.
So thank you so much.
I'll turn it over here. If you need me to adjust the slides, I can. You just let me know.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna turn my camera off just so that you can have as much bandwidth as possible. All right. So thank you, Pete. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Let's talk about warts. I love treating warts. It's a disturbing thing. So we all know that the cause of plantar warts is the human papillomavirus, which is a double-stranded DNA virus. And we know there's different strains of HPV, namely 1, 2, 4, 27, 57, just to name a few. But the thing that I really want to drive home right now is that warts, the warts that we think about are not that deep. They're superficial, okay? The virus, HPV virus, infects the basal keratinocyte in the basal or deepest layer of the epidermis. When you debride a wart and you see that pinpoint bleeding, that's because the wart has created a papillomatosis, or an interdigitation of the papillary dermis. So it's created the papillary dermis where the little blood vessels are, because the blood vessels are in the dermis, not in the epidermis. It's created them to be more like finger-like versus more of like a hill or sine or cosine wave. So as a wart is resolving, you will see less and less of those red dots or those thrombosed capillaries, because the dermis is going back to normal. So the thing is whenever people have focused on going deep with warts, they really don't have to. You have to focus on the epidermis, which is where the wart is. So a question that patients ask me a lot is, am I contagious? Well, let's talk about that. So you have the HPV virus infecting the basal keratinocyte where there is cell, the nuclei are dividing, okay? Once the cell goes past the basal layer and it transits upwards towards the stratum corneum, it loses its power to have the nucleus divide. And basically what the virus does is it takes over the cellular organelles and it makes it replicate its DNA and makes it create its viral envelope. So by the time you have that cell, as you can see in the slide, get up to the stratum corneum, you have a fully developed viral particle with its DNA and the viral envelope. And as you are walking, your skin is shedding. So, whenever I'm walking barefoot in my house or walking barefoot in a hotel room, my skin shedding. And if I had a wart, that skin cell that would be shedding is releasing the virus into the environment. So yes, you are contagious when you have an active wart. So no completely effective therapy exists, because patients are coming to you whether it's because they have a cosmetic concern or it's actually painful. So our goal is to restore the skin appearance and clear the visual appearance of the lesion. Now, there are patients that have their warts disappear within 2 years, but I never see those patients because obviously they wouldn't be coming to me if their wart just disappeared. And I always have to discuss the risk benefits and the course of each therapy with the patient, because scars can happen, pain can happen. But why isn't it a one-size-fits-all treatment? Well, this was a really interesting, lovely study that was done with warts, plantar warts specifically, looking at 4 subtypes of HPV. And in the 4 subtypes of HPV, they identified not only what these warts look like visually, but they also figured out what the warts are responding to treatment-wise. So for instance, HPV subtype 1, which is what we see a lot in our pediatric patients. They look like punched out mole-like plantar warts, right? They're very common. They respond beautifully to sal acid and freezing. However, HPV subtypes 2, 27, and 57 do not. So if you only have cryo and sal acid in your practice, you are missing a good bulk of your patients. But it also explains why you might wonder, well, this works on my pediatric patients. Why doesn't anything work on my adult patients? Because again, depending on the subtypes respond differently to different types of treatment. They're not all the same. So you can see in this slide what HPV subtype 1 looks like, and we've all seen that in our pediatric patients. But HPV subtype 27 and 57 look very different, and again, respond differently to different therapies. Some don't respond to cryo, some don't respond to sal acid. So it's good to have different things in your armamentarium so that you can effectively reach all the different subtypes of HPV. Another barrier to resolution that's unique to podiatric medicine is the gait cycle and the biomechanics we face. So Kebnerization, which you might not have heard that term since podiatry school, is defined as when you traumatize a lesion, it gets worse. So we think of that with psoriasis. We also think of that with HPV, Kaposi sarcoma, all of those different things. When you traumatize the lesion, it gets worse. So think about the plantar heel warts. Every time they walk, they're getting it worse. Or the periungual warts. Every time, if they have a hammer toe, it's getting just chronic trauma and chronic pressure. One thing that I do utilize to help me visualize if I'm dealing with a wart or a callus is something called a dermatoscope or dermoscopy. It's a handheld device I keep in my coat pocket that's a magnifying glass with polarized light. And this really has helped me, especially as I've gotten older, to be able to see things better. So for instance, in this slide, I'm using this to, like, this is from a paper, but this is what I'm seeing every day. I'm looking at a lesion, looking at it prior to debridement, which is what you're seeing in the middle picture. And at the end picture, you see that the skin lines are interrupted and there's little thrombosed capillaries. That's a plantar wart under the dermatoscope. It kind of looks like a honeycomb. In the middle picture aisle, you see a lesion, you see prior to debridement, you see skin lines, but post debridement, it looks like a halo. That's an IPK. The last row that you see skin lines, you see skin lines when you're debriding, and then skin lines after you've debrided. That's a true callus. So, beyond the pinch test, which also helps me diagnose, sometimes the pinch test doesn't give me the whole clue. So I use the dermatoscope to really help me not only diagnose, but also to follow therapy. So when I'm doing treatment, whatever treatment I'm doing with these patients, I am using the dermatoscope each time to basically see, is the patient having resolution of their lesion? So what other options do we have? We can just debride them. We can freeze them. We can blister them with cantharidin. We can laser them. We can cut them out. We can inject them, or we can microwave them, which is the newest one. So the other thing that makes warts so unique in that they take over the basal keratinocytes cellular organelle process is that they don't produce anything on the surface of the cell to let your Langerhans cells or your skin's immune system know that there is an infection there. So, most of the time our skin cells or other cells are going to have something on the surface of that cell will present it, and then you'll have antibodies, right? Well, with HPV, it's literally like a Trojan horse, and that's what I think of it, and that's how I explain it to my patients. It's a virus in a cell, and it's infected, but nobody knows. The skin's immune system doesn't know, doesn't care. So we have to do something to initiate that immune process, right? What can we do to get those Langerhans cells to know that there is something going on with that cell? So the microwave is something that is studied. It came out of the UK. Dr. Bristow, who is my counterpart in the UK, was a big part of this machine in its development. And I've known about this machine a long time before it came to the United States. And I used to bother Dr. Bristow, like, can I get this machine? I really want this machine. I really, really, really want this machine. So thankfully I finally got it. But before that, I was excited to see what their results were. And this was a landmark paper showing its use in the treatment of a plantar wart. So what are the advantages of using the Swift machine or the Swift microwave machine for plantar warts? Well, there's no plume, so there's no smoke like we have when we laser patients. Little to no downtime. Basically, what I experience are patients who do have pain in their lesion have a gross decrease of pain, whether it's immediate or within the week. I've had patients come in with plantar warts who are runners, and they're like, I can't run. I'm in so much pain. And they'll report back to me with their second treatment saying, Doc, I can't believe it. After 1 week of having that treatment, I had no pain. And that's a beautiful thing. The other thing is that there's no anesthesia required. There's 1 or 2 patients in my practice I actually do a local injection, but on the whole, 99% of them do not. And there's no dressings. I don't have to apply a Band-Aid. There's nothing that they need. There's, again, little to zero downtime. So it really depends on the patient there, but on the whole, no downtime. So what is microwave energy? I know when I explain it to my patients, the first thing they think of, and I can see it in their mind, that they think that I'm going to put their foot in a box. I'm like, no, microwave energy is between, radiation energy and optical light, right? So basically, it's doing what you think it's going to be doing. The heating of the water molecules, it's making them align in the microwave field, and it's creating this rapid heat that's creating those collisions. The water molecule collisions are creating friction, which is creating rapid heat. So a power comparison, the Swift microwave system is in the middle. That's what it looks like. It's not a box. The actual microwave in your kitchen is on the side, and that's about 1,000 watts versus your mobile phone, which is about 100 milliwatts. So it's almost more like putting your foot on your phone, although I don't recommend that, more than it is an actual microwave that you use in your kitchen. So it's on the lower end, of course. So this is creating immune modulation. As I mentioned before, we have to uncloak the virus. We have to open the Trojan horse and let the body know that it's there. So this is non-ablative. What is ablative? Ablative is where you're cutting the skin. If you have used a CO2 laser in your lifetime as a practitioner, you have ablated a lesion, okay? So that's tissue destruction. The microwave, the Swift microwave, is a non-ablative machine. So we're basically causing that rapid heat, causing that, elevating that tissue temperature into the hyperthermic range anywhere from
I think we
Tracy,
might be losing you there.
We lost you. You're coming back in.
You've got me?
She's back.
Did you lose me at the beginning of the slide?
Yeah, you were just Hello? Talking about elevating tissue temperatures up into the hyperthermic range.
Okay, so again, if you've used a CO2 laser, that's ablative. That's tissue destruction. This is non-ablative, so this is not causing tissue destruction. Range that it's uncloaking the virus. So you are getting the heat shock proteins being expressed on the surface of the cell, the keratinocyte, which is allowing the Langerhans cells to know that there's something there. So this is immunotherapy or immune modulation. So a summary of findings that have been done in some papers and posters around the world was that there was increased cellular apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. This is, again, reduction of the proliferation of the immortal cells, upregulation of the heat shock proteins. And to me, that's the important one, is that heat shock proteins and the apoptosis. So we're gently killing those cells because we're allowing something to be on the surface of them for immunotherapy to take place. So the preliminary study results of it demonstrated immune response of the 54 warts that were treated by the microwave. 41 had resolution. 13 didn't have resolution, and there was one who just didn't show up. That always happens. There are 9 that remain unresolved, right? There's always patients who have some, form of non-resolution. And there are 3 warts that basically withdrew from the study. And that always has, someone who does clinical trials, that always happens. But the bottom line is that it created a response in this tissue. So how do we treat patients? Well, I treat patients once every 4 weeks. And I'm applying the microwave device to their wart for 2 seconds, 5 times. So if it's an isolated lesion, that's 5 times 2 seconds. But when I have larger lesions, I am getting that whole surface area. So, if they have more than one lesion, I'll go between the warts to make it comfortable for them. And then you can do a follow-up time period. Most of my patients, I'm following them with the dermatoscope. So when I see resolution, I'm discharging them from my practice. So in the studies, there was an 83% resolution rate and a less than 1% recurrence. I definitely have not seen recurrence in my practice at this time. So, but I do change the energy, which can be anywhere from 8 to 10 watts. I am changing that based on the location and the skin thickness. So for instance, the tips of the toes, I am not doing at the same watt level as I am the bottom of the foot or the heel. It really depends on the patient, but to try to do that same energy level on the tips of the toes is really uncomfortable for the patient. So I'm very cognizant of where I'm treating and what I'm treating. So these were the first patients I treated. Now, in the picture that, at the beginning of the arrow where it says January, I had used pulse dye laser on that patient prior to using the microwave. So you can see the dried blood that is very characteristic of when you are treating someone with a pulse dye laser. That's what it looks like a few weeks after. So I treated this patient in January, the first time I received the microwave. I treated the patient in February, and in March, at the end of the arrow, that is showing resolution. There's skin lines throughout that area, so that patient had complete resolution after 2 treatments. This patient, the 21, 18, and 18, those are the actual days of the month that I treated. So January was the first time I treated them. February was their second treatment. You can see there's a little bit left. And March, I did not treat them. That was their follow-up visit, and the wart had resolved. Again, with this patient had received no other treatment prior to my using the Swift microwave on their wart. So you can see the top picture is that lovely, juicy, happy wart. The middle picture, again, had great resolution after the first treatment, but there was still a little bit there via my dermatoscope, so I treated it a second time. And on the third visit in March, there was resolution of the lesion. So I just want to state really quickly that I have also used this on IPKs. I have patients who come in with the genetic form of IPKs. They're very painful, or they just have an IPK in general. So I was inspired by Dr. Bristow's work in the UK to utilize them on patients, and it's more about pain control. And that is what has happened. In fact, I still see one of my first patients I did this on regularly. He comes to me for other things, but he has brought his whole family in to see me for microwave therapy because they all have the genetic IPK type lesions on their feet. His lesion actually disappeared. So even though it wasn't a wart fulminantly with a dermatoscope, it was, again, something that he's had for years. It's very painful. He just was miserable. He tried all different kinds of treatments. After the first treatment with the Swift microwave, he had no pain, and that was life-changing for him. And I never did another treatment on him. He didn't need it. He's like, I have no pain. But I just recently saw him about 2 or 3 weeks ago again for another issue, and I couldn't find the lesion. So I was really, really happy for him. Unfortunately, he's got other things that I've got to deal with that I can't treat with the microwave. But again, I have used it for things other than plantar warts. So that is the end of my formal presentation. I'm not sure if there are questions or if there's going to be questions that you're going to moderate for me.
I got a bunch for you. So that's great, Tracy. Thank you. I love the costume. I hope you wear that in the office too, especially this coming week. So,
the thing is nobody can say that I'm not Wonder Woman because you've never seen me and Wonder Woman in the same room. Just saying.
Oh, there you go. I like it. That's great. Good. So a couple of things. I'll start with some questions for you, Tracy, and then some even for Pete. Tracy, I've been a big fan of dermoscopy, and I'm certainly not an expert at it by any means, but a couple of questions with that is, one, how does one become trained on using it properly? And secondly, do you bill your patients for the dermoscopic exam?
Okay, so the first thing is you don't bill for dermoscopy. It is part of your diagnostic process, and it takes seconds to do. How did I learn it? It took time. It is not something you learn overnight. There is a learning curve. And I went to a lot of dermatology meetings. I read a lot of books. I went on a lot of websites. I have given dermoscopy workshops at the APMA, and I'm sure, I'll be giving, dermoscopy lectures other meetings, but that's a place to start. There's some great textbooks out there. There's some great websites out there for free that you can at least start reading about it and getting your eyes wet, so to speak, so that you can at least start to learn patterns. Because again, it's a lot about learning patterns. It's a lot about feeling comfortable. It is meant for pigmented lesions. That's what it was designed for, but I use it for so much more than that, especially again for warts. And nobody tells you when you're over 40 that your eyes just betray you. When you see things up close, that that you need your bifocals and all that stuff. So
just wait till you're north of 60. Just wait till you're north of 60, dear. You'll see. That's great. Hey, so another question was, do you ever use Aldera cream?
So in my hands, I have never had success with Aldera. I first started prescribing Aldera when I was doing my dermatology fellowship on genital warts, because that's what it was meant for. So of course, when I went into regular practice, podiatric practice, I tried it. I have had zero success. I know there are podiatrists out there who have had success with Aldera and plantar warts. I just don't seem to have it in my hands. And that's just me. It doesn't mean it's not right or wrong. I just don't. So I don't prescribe it.
Okay, very good. You talked a little bit about the contagiousness of this, and I think, at least in my own practice, the majority of the patients who had this were adolescents, young teenagers, mid-teenagers, right over, and then for whatever reason they seem to get to adulthood, and maybe it was hormonal. You could explain that maybe to me. But so you talked about contagiousness. What should people do with their shoes, for example, if they've had a history of warts? Should they actually shed their shoes, or can they sanitize them like everything else in the world today?
So it's a great question. Like yesterday, I had a teenage girl whose mom said, you know what, her brother just developed them. I'm going to have to bring them both in now. But I've also had 80-year-olds with warts because they're watching their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. So I see people of all ages with warts. It's contagious. HPV is everywhere in the environment. You cannot get away from it. What I was taught in the dermatology world was that you need 3 things for plantar warts to occur. You need exposure to the virus, which it's everywhere. Can't get away from that. You need a small trauma or cut to the skin, not a cut that you would feel, but think of like just like a rough feeling that you would feel if you were in a concrete pool. You were walking on a concrete pool bottom. And then lastly, you need the third thing, which is a slightly depressed immune system. Maybe you weren't feeling so good that day. So it doesn't mean, like, I touch warts all day. I should be tree man with my fingers, right? I should have terrible warts on my fingers. I do not. But the point is you need those 3 things, really. So we don't have data on sanitizing and what it does, but because viruses live on fomites, right? They live on inanimate objects. It certainly wouldn't be a bad idea to use a light device like the UV shoe sanitizers to assist in that. I don't recommend ever using spray Lysol in shoes because Lysol can be a potent contact allergy sensitizer, and you can develop an allergy to Lysol. So if patients really do want to use Lysol, I tell them to spray a piece of paper and put that in the shoe, but not to directly spray it into the shoe because I worry about contact allergy.
So we asked about imiquimod. What about Tagamet? Have you had experience with the use of cimetidine?
It was something that I utilized as a resident. I utilized a little bit as a fellow, and again saw zero success. It has been shown in papers subsequent to the original paper that it's different than placebo. So the placebos had the same effect, which was not much for plantar warts. Again, there are some podiatrists out there who have fantastic success with Tagamet. Keep in mind, the patients that I see in my practice, I am the 4th or 5th physician to see them. So they are someone who has failed everything. So a lot of the things that people utilize, I see failures from. So, I don't have cryo or sal acid in my practice at all. I don't do it because most people have come to me who have failed that. So I don't use Tagamet at all.
Very good. So here's a good scientific one for you. Do you think there's damage to the lipid skin barrier with warts?
Absolutely. Anytime you have a compromise in the skin barrier, you have something going on with the skin. Your lipids are a big part of your skin. That's what makes your skin skin. So absolutely, you do.
So when you treat your patients for warts, what's the protocol do you follow moving through? Like you talked a little bit about that, but do you have a stepwise approach, or does that depend on what they've had done already, or what you see, or all the above?
So keep in mind, again, most of the people that I have seen have gone to a physician, whether it's a dermatologist, a primary care physician, or a podiatrist for a year or more before they've come to see me, and they've already exhausted cryo and sal acid. So there's no way I'm going to repeat that, right? So it's why I don't even have it. So it depends on their activity level, how many warts are present, again, what they've had before, and what they expect, and also what they can handle. So for instance, if somebody's needle phobic, the last thing I'm going to do is a candida injection or bleomycin injection. Some patients are hell-bent on having laser, and that's fine. Some people just, that's what they believe in. For many patients, I will use topical cantharidin to start out with. Cantharidin, as you know, right now currently is not FDA approved, but it probably will be very soon.
So can I interrupt you only and ask you, where do you find it? That's a very common question I get from my providers.
We buy it from Dormer Labs. So the school buys it for me. We buy
That's in Canada, correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Dormer Labs.
Yeah, thank you. That's it. I apologize for jumping in the middle there, but that's a question I hear all the time. And that's my answer too, is that's the only place to find it. So I was curious if you had some Wonder Woman outlet somewhere that you got it from.
I wish. Actually, I wish I could just milk the beetles in the backyard, but hey,
we've got them all up. We've got them all up here, Tracy.
Exactly.
For some reason, we're hoarding them in Canada. I'm not sure what it is.
I know.
So is it typically 2 to 3 treatments, Tracy? Is that pretty much a standard, or is that dependent on what you're seeing? That is very standard. Okay. That is very standard, yes. Yeah, you have to give it time. Keep in mind, your skin turns over every 21 days. So having somebody back once a week doesn't make any sense. You're not going to see any change. You also have to be aware that any of the treatments that we do can produce the Kebner phenomenon. So freezing can cause Kebner. Debridement can cause the Kebner phenomenon, even cantharidin. So you have to make sure that you're following these patients at somewhat of an interval. I'm seeing these patients that I'm not doing microwave on every 2 to 3 weeks. If I'm doing laser or microwave, I'm seeing them once a month. Very good, very good. So there's some questions about charges, and I know, Pete, you're answering those privately, which is good because we really shouldn't talk in public about charges because that's an antitrust thing, so we don't want to do that. But I know you're answering those privately, which is good too. Oh, here's a good one. How long does the virus thrive typically once it's shedded?
So it can thrive for definitely at least a week or so on fomites.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a hardy virus, so that's why you've got to do something.
So we've kind of touched on this a little bit too, but this is just a little more specific about your immune modulating creams such as Elidel or Effudex. Do you play with those at all?
Yes. So Effudex, specifically 5-fluorouracil, there's some evidence. So I end up using or prescribing both 5-fluorouracil and topical adapalene. Adapalene is an acne medication that is now over the counter known as Differin. So I utilize those depends on something at home, right? They just want to come in the office and have something done. Some patients really want to do something at home. So it really is patient dependent, but I do prescribe 5-fluorouracil and recommend adapalene the most.
So, and another scientific question, do you think that the microwave causes coagulation of the capillaries in the warts? Oh, I think we lost you, Tracy. At least you're in freeze mode. Maybe Mr. Freeze found Wonder Woman.
well played.
I will get him. Can you hear me now?
There you go. We got you back. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I don't see the coagulation happening. That's more of a laser thing.
Very good. So I have a couple questions for Pete here too. And Pete, I know you're seeing these at the same time, but people are asking about the cost of the unit or how that works out for their practice. So you can talk about that.
Yeah, great. So typically we lease them, Mike. So we put them onto a 60-month lease term. Comes out to about $470 a month. The profit from one patient usually covers that lease payment. So it's interesting. Usually it's sort of like, I don't think I see that many warts. Can I justify the cost of the device? And it's really a low barrier when you sort of break it down that way. And so for us, our goal becomes, how can we get you as many of those? You need to see or treat about 30 patients to pay off the device. That's kind of the metric we like to talk about. So it's kind of like how fast can we get through the 30? When you're trying to break down how quick can I get there? So primary ways to do that is number one, look at your pre-existing patient flow. So the average podiatrist we speak to it's between 5 to 10 warts a month, roughly. We see about a 70% conversion rate. So not everyone who comes through the door is going to say yes to Swift, because it is outside of traditional reimbursement codes. So it's something people are billing cash for. So not everyone's going to say yes to it. And that was a big question for us when we launched, is how many people would say yes versus how many would say, no, I want to go with whatever my insurance covers. And it's about 70%. So 7 out of 10 will say Swift makes sense. And it's for the reason that Tracy was talking about. I know Tracy sees the worst of the worst patients, but most podiatrists see recalcitrant patients. And when you actually stop and talk to these patients, they're like, oh no, I've done something over the counter, tried primary care, didn't work. So now you failed 2 sort of modalities of treatment, topicals and typically cryo. Then they'll usually go to a dermatologist. That's the typical kind of pathway. And then they're coming to a podiatrist being like, I can't believe that I'm still looking for help. It's been 6 months and I've tried 3 different providers. So they're coming to you and they're like, well, what do you got? And so it's a really hard thing for providers to be like, I got the same thing as the last 3 people that failed. So it's been a really neat journey for us, because some of these patient stories, which we didn't anticipate, are like really emotional, like they're really emotive. And then when they do find Swift, like from our marketing efforts, or if they're just doing their own research, they're willing to travel long distances. I mean, people have flown in to see Tracy. It's crazy how there's a lot of people who are sitting there who've kind of given up on, there's like, I'm just going to have these warts forever. And they just kind of try to accept
I have people specifically sent to me from podiatry and dermatology being sent to me for Swift.
Yeah, and the derms, Dr. King, also, I know it's kind of a long answer to your question, but the derms are, it's been a really good partnership actually with our podiatry practices. Dermatologists have wait lists for 6 months, most of them. And they're more than happy to refer their plantar wart patients to podiatrists, like more than happy, as long as we're getting them better and they're coming back to see them when they need, fine line and wrinkle treatment, or they need cool sculpting or whatever, the high value stuff, like, for them, they're like, great. They call warts the ego killer, and which it is. Like, it's sort of that thing you have to look at and be like, I'm not sure I can help you here.
No, long answer, but all your nose back to them.
Yeah, exactly. Long answer, but it's basically we lease it, and it's a patient a month. That's kind of the break even point.
Yeah. You have to purchase the tips as well, Pete. So what's the cost of the tips? And then an interesting question I got was, why aren't they reusable?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You kind of answered that already, but
yeah, we do get that a lot, and it's one of the kind of the rubs of the device. I think we'd probably have more devices out there if this wasn't a setup. Unfortunately, we don't control sort of product design, but this is one of the probes. The device is behind me, but so you've got a probe and you've got this disposable head. Okay, and this disposable head has got componentry in it which controls the amount of energy that device can release. The components in there are the same components that are used in interventional oncology for the treatment of and full ablation of more advanced tumors. But this is what takes that same really high-end componentry and takes it into a subablative immune modulation component. So there's actually a fair bit of componentry in here. So the tips themselves are expensive. They're about $68. So typical treatment charge is between $200 and $300 in the US. So it varies rough. The average is about $250. And so that from that standpoint, the clinic keeps sort of in that sort of 180 to 200 kind of a range per treatment. So still good margin, good profit margin, but yeah, there is a disposable component to it. And again, that's kind of what the upside of that is. It kind of what keeps us interested. That's part of our business model too. So we're really motivated to send you guys. The more patients you see, the more tips we sell. So we actually invest our own money into Google ad spend. We get landing pages up for all of our clinics. There's a whole marketing partnership that goes with that. As far as why they're not reusable, it's something we've talked to our engineers in Scotland about. They're trying to look at ways to do it, but HPV transmission with the FDA, they're pretty strict on it. So that's why it's had to be a disposable. But we're trying to figure out ways maybe around it, and certainly trying to be more environmentally conscious as well.
So there's a long question I'll get to in just a second, but why doesn't the insurance cover this? Is it an FDA approved issue, or is it just no code that exists for it at this point?
Good question, and it was one of our big questions when we launched. We thought maybe it'd be covered under 17110, and there was some debate around it early on, but the consensus really has been two things. Number one, being totally non-destructive, it really is kind of a different mechanism of action. So what we're trying to do is not do anything to destroy the wart. We're trying to stimulate immunity. So the question was like, is there a code? Where does it sit? Does it sit within an immunotherapy code? All the immunotherapy codes are really specifically linked to like a place. Like they're like, yep, it has to be in an interventional oncology setting. So it's quite narrow that way. Eventually, what I think will happen is we will apply for a differentiated immunotherapy code at some stage, I'm guessing. It may not be. A lot of our providers actually are like, hey, make sure you never get a code. Like that's the one thing you just got to promise us you never do that, because codes always go down, whereas you can always adjust your pricing if you're in that environment. So it's kind of an interesting thing. We'd like it to be more accessible. But at this point, it's sort of in that basket of cash pay, which I think is good. And some people are a bit nervous about cash pay, but when you're providing a genuine solution to something, people are a bit worried about like, oh, well, I have to sell it as a cash pay therapy. And I don't know, Tracy, I mean, you still have to get your patients to pay, and because Temple's still paying for tips, but
Yes.
I know you were surprised even at some of your patients because you're not in an affluent area, and I think you've even been surprised at how willing they are to do that. We certainly have been surprised
Yes.
at how willing they are.
The patients often will come and say, I've spent so much money on this wart already between copays and deductibles with their other providers, that they're like, if this will get rid of this in so many visits, I'm willing to put that out. So that's what I've seen over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And with the coding side of it, we did look. I remember I was helping early on in this game.
Yeah.
We looked at some of the immune response codes, but unfortunately, they were all oncologic based, and they were just pushing the envelope too far. Most of them dealt with myelogenous kind of immunities, and that was a real problem. So
yeah. And the other piece too is like
one. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pete.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, we would be putting ourselves in hot water too to be like, yeah, absolutely, go bill 17110. That would be, we wouldn't want people to have claims denied because it would likely happen. We know that insurance providers will say, hey, this is experimental. Anything that's not, at least 5 years old within a certain market, they'll find a way to call it experimental. So that's part of it. The other part of it too, you mentioned
20-year-old stuff. They find ways to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Implants come to mind.
Right. And then part of it is too the FDA clearance. So we have a clearance off the predicate device, which is an oncological device. And so they'd say, okay, it's FDA cleared. We don't approve it for. So we'd be putting ourselves and our clients and you guys in hot water if they're like, yeah, totally, bill away 17110, you'll be good to go, and then you'd be calling us pretty angry. So
Tracy, here's a little more of a lengthy one, but so I've had hit or miss results with the therapy, some amazing results, some not, which is consistent with any therapy, of course. I've had a few patients that have had 2 to 3 treatments with not much response. What do you usually recommend with those warts?
It just depends on what they have or haven't had previous to that. You have to give it at least four treatments. That's what I do. Okay.
And then another one, they said they had somebody with a large patch and they couldn't really tolerate the treatment. So they did an excision, but they said they came in with a T-shaped wound into adipose layer. Mm-hmm. Any ideas why?
I don't know what their excision technique was. I don't know what they did. So it's really hard to assess what that could be.
Good. Well, that's that's the last of the questions I have. Do you guys want to make any other comments before we close down the shop? A lot of great questions and a lot of great comments on this, both of you guys today. Thank you.
I'm going to, Dr. King, if you don't mind, I'm going to launch a. That was our study. If you just go back a slide, we're going to be we're excited about some of the research we're doing in onychomycosis. That's looking pretty good. Tracy's going to be joining us on that. I'm going to try launching a poll to see what happens. I don't know if this comes up for anybody. I just tried launching an offer. If anybody wants to learn more, you can click there. You can give us your information, and we can get you like an info pack with study information and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if that's up or not, but if you'd like to learn more, there's a little button there. It'll take you to a little form. It said I've published it, but it's under offers. I don't know if that's come through. If not, you can just go to our website.
I'm sure that we can get that over to the Taylor website so that people can go there and find it, Pete. We can work with Carla and the team and Siobhan, and I'm sure we could get this up on the Taylor website.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Well, thank you
really
guys.
Appreciate it, Dr. King, and
a lot of good comments.
A
lot of good attendees, great questions. Tracy, thanks for being mobile and doing this. I know that's always a challenge. But we're thank everybody for being attending.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. And we appreciate everyone being here. And we're hoping that you'll join us again in 2 weeks. We have our next is on carbon fiber AFOs, what you need to know about applications, custom modifications and billing, and it's presented by Joseph DeHeer. Many of you know his father, Patrick DeHeer, member of the APMA Board of Trustees and a very successful surgical practice in Indiana. Joseph is one of the co-founders of a pedorthic company in Indiana called Thrive Orthopedics. They have amazing carbon fiber AFOs, by the way, for drop foot problems, and also with Chris Kale, CPO. And I assume Dr. Kraus and I will be part of the moderating team. But thank you again to Tracy, Dr. Lahovic. Pardon me, I always do that backwards. I got Saoirse right, but I can't get you right, Tracy.
I know. Cool.
Lahovic, like Vlasic pickles. It's like saying Vlasic pickles.
I heard Vlahovic. Got it. But thank you, Dr. Vlahovic, and thank you to Mr. Turnbull, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We appreciate it. Everyone have a nice, safe night, and we'll see you soon. Be well. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.